All right. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I should have warned you that I was recording. Welcome to the King Podcast.
With your hosts,
Nathan Smith.
and Zach King.
Exactly. This podcast today, we're going to be talking about some of the top 10 or 20 Got Questions from gotquestions.org.
We're going to get to as many as we can. Probably going to end up being,
Maybe like 5 or 6.
5 or 6.
Yeah.
Or 2 or 3, depending on.
Right, exactly. Oh boy. How do we want to do this? Do we want to just scroll through and click a button? Or do we want to just go from top to the bottom?
Let's just go from top to bottom and see how far we get.
Well, this is going to be an interesting...
Yeah.
This is going to be interesting.
We could go from bottom to top. I don't care.
There's some fun questions on here that I think are actually more interesting than the top ones. 'Cause I think the top ones most people agree with. What does the Bible say about divorce and remarriage?
Okay, so here's the thing. In the Old Testament, at least in the Old Testament, and under Jewish law, God did have a provision for divorce.
Mm-hmm. In Deuteronomy, I think is.
Yeah, in Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so God did have a provision for divorce in the Old Testament under the law. Now, I assume when Jesus came down, he said he did not come to destroy the law or to do away with the law. He said he come to fulfill the law.
Mm-hmm.
So while we are no longer under the judgment of the law,
Right.
some of those principles from that we can kind of carry through. So
Right.
I'd say that this might sound weird, but I'd say the provision from the Old Testament that God had for the nation of Israel under the law for divorce is still applicable.
You mean like with Moses?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So, and that being said, that provision basically states that you are not to divorce your spouse unless it is like extremely necessary.
Yeah. Like there's some rules. I think in First
Right.
Corinthians they respell it out, if I
Right.
remember right. It's like it's sexual morality and
Yeah, there's something else.
if she walks out of the relationship,
Right.
or if the other person, I should say, for us it would be she, but if
Right.
the other person walks out of the relationship intentionally,
Right.
and I
So-
think that's on the basis if that individual. No, I think that would. Let me pull up the passage.
I think sexual immorality is like the big thing that it falls under. Or adultery, it should be. But excuse me. Thanks.
Yeah. 1 Corinthians 7. If the unbelieving partner separates, let it be so. In such cases, the brother or sister is not enslaved.
Yeah.
So, if it's an unbelieving partner and they don't want to be reconciled and they leave,
You're right.
it's fine.
It's good.
You can.
Now-
I think you can be remarried under that one.
Remarriage is interesting because, again, neither of us have been married. Neither of us have been
Right.
divorced.
There's a lot of different stances on this topic too. Holy smokes!
It really, I think this is a more conviction-based thing
Uh-huh.
for me. Like, if you think someone who has been divorced or is divorced, or even someone who has lost their spouse due to death,
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be remarried, by all means, that's fine. But personally, I do not see a problem with it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, unless that their new partner is abusive in some way, then I'll be
Right.
like, okay, that's not a
Right.
good relationship. Don't. Now,
Wait, were you? Okay, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep going.
now
I'm reading something here.
on the other side of that, divorce for the sake of divorce, I don't think it's right.
No, absolutely not.
It is not
No,
right.
that's sin. That's sinful.
That is sinful. If you're just
If you're like, oh, this is
this, if you,
it's work. He did this one thing. He didn't fry my steak right. Okay, no.
no, or if
No.
you feel like, okay, this relationship isn't working. There's a line on that where, okay, the relationship isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that, okay, you need to figure it out while you're dating someone.
Right.
You know, is there that's kind of what the courtship dating time is
Mm-hmm.
for you guys. Is this relationship gonna work?
Right. Right.
Now, that being said, everything has its challenges, so I'm not saying run at the first sign of trouble. I'm just saying be careful
Mm-hmm.
before you make what is supposed to be a lifelong commitment
Yes.
to another person. Yeah. Yeah, just be careful before you do that and dive in.
So, what's your take on DV?
DV?
Domestic violence, divorce, remarriage, that kind of stuff.
Oh, if there's domestic violence involved, I'm completely okay with the person saying my partner, whether it's a man or a woman. Yes, women can do DV too.
Yeah, either way. Yeah.
Either way, I am perfectly okay with someone saying my partner is abusive, whether physically or verbally or any other way. My partner's abusive. I'm going to leave them.
Right.
I am perfectly okay with you getting divorced. And on top of that, I'm perfectly okay with you finding someone who, this is a really good person.
Mm-hmm.
They treat me right. They treat me like I'm supposed to be treated. You find someone that actually loves you and cares about you and does all that, go ahead.
So, I. Oh, sorry, I got a text message. So I've got a take on this, and
Yeah.
I think most people, I think the layperson will probably agree with this statement. But I was talking with a few pastors not too long ago, and one of them said that they do not believe in divorce for domestic violence.
Really?
I won't go into my internal reaction when I heard that. But I think 1 Corinthians 7:15. I gotta zoom out. I gotta zoom out a little bit before I dive into the passage as to where my belief on this is. So DV, domestic violence. Most of the time, DV ends up being sexual in some way.
Right.
And most of the time, not most of the time, a good chunk of the time, it is an unbeliever to a believer.
Right.
A lot of the time it is. Sometimes it is a believer to a believer, which makes things interesting.
Right.
So, given that most DV is sexual in nature,
You're right.
Yeah, I believe that to be sexual immorality.
You're right.
I think that's sinful. I think
Right.
that's means enough to walk out.
Right. If your partner says no, don't push it.
Well, and but not even just that. Okay,
Right.
if there is like repeated patterns, we've talked about this, why are you doing this? Or
Right.
even if there's stuff that is legally across the line,
Right.
I think that's enough to say this is actually an immoral situation. we're done.
Right.
Now, and that's horrible to think about.
Right.
It's terrible to think about. It's really sad to think about, honestly.
Oh, totally.
Now, in the case of if an unbeliever is doing things, beating or otherwise,
Harming.
um,
You know.
Paul does give permission in 1 Corinthians 7 for the other person to divorce and also remarry. The
Right.
freedom is open-ended there. And I think that's the key thing, is that it's open-ended. Because if you give up on the relationship, it
Right.
doesn't necessarily mean they just walk out. They don't have to
Exactly.
physically walk out to be checked out.
Right.
That's my view on that.
Right.
That might be a young person view. That might be a wrong view, but that's the view I have. If you're checked out, you're checked out.
Right.
And if you're beating somebody or whatever, then just walk away. Just
You're right.
yeah.
Now, that being said,
Or if you're getting beat up, I should say.
Now-
Well, either way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, all this being said, divorce and remarriage isn't what God intended for our world.
No. I think everyone would agree with that.
Yeah. Divorce and remarriage is not what God intended for our world. Sin isn't what God intended for our world. Sin and its consequences, including death, are unnatural to us
Mm-hmm.
in the way that God did not create us in that way
Right.
to experience these things. So, just because, and this is something I come up with we come in contact with all the time,
Mm-hmm.
especially here in America. Of the slavery's in the Bible. That means God approves of it.
Mm-hmm.
No, He doesn't. Just because the Bible talks about something does not mean, or talks about a sin, does not mean God approves of it.
Right. Right.
God brought judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah for their numerous sins.
Mhm.
It wasn't just one sin that the Sodom and Gomorrah were committing.
Right.
There was a number of sins going on in those two cities that God was saying,
Right.
these cities are so evil and so corrupt down to their very core that I just have to wipe them off the map.
Right.
That's what God was saying with Sodom
Right.
and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
So just because God provides in His law, God provides something for people to get divorced and
Mhm.
remarried, does not mean that's the way He intends it. It does not mean that's the way He approves. That's what He approves of.
Right.
He just realizes that this is a natural. Right now, this is a part of the world
Uh-huh.
that just has to be dealt with.
Right.
So yeah,
Now, here's something that I wrestle with this.
right,
If you're in a abusive situation
right,
and it's not, sexual in any way,
right,
and it's not an unbeliever to a
Right.
believer, it gets murky.
right,
My current view is that, especially if it's repeated, I'm a believer in giving grace first
right.
and then acting,
Oh yeah.
and that seems to follow Matthew 18. You confront it and then
I'm a believer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a believer in. There can be accidents.
right,
They did
Right.
something. They acted differently this one time. Okay.
yeah. Like, what was the situation? What made them do that? Because if they're not normally like that,
Right.
especially if they're a nice guy or nice gal or whatever, and,
Right.
and then, you're married for 10 years, and then out of the blue, randomly does something or she does something. Like, okay, was there meds involved? Were
Right.
they sick? Were
Uh,
they, did they have a traumatic event in their life happen and they're
Okay.
acting out? Like,
Did something happen at
yeah.
work, or it could be
Yeah.
a number of things.
Yeah, it really
So-
could be, and it's not an excuse, but it's empathy, and
Right.
it's having empathy and grace in being able to address the situation.
Right.
But if it's something that I think is repeated, more than two or
Right.
three times, really, then it's like, okay, there's a habit here. There's something systemic. I am of the view that and maybe I need to reconcile myself a little more, because I've gone back and forth on this. I'm not gonna lie, but if you're getting beat, like if your life is being threatened, I don't
there's
I don't think you should be.
you shouldn't be in that
bound.
And on that side of it, yes, there can be grace and empathy there as well. Of
Mhm.
oh, maybe their parents raised them like this.
Yeah,
Maybe this is normal for them on some level.
but it shouldn't
But
be.
it should. Right. I'm not saying it should be. I'm just
Yeah.
saying maybe this is normal for them, and they know no other way.
Mhm.
You can have grace and empathy for for a person who saying, "Hey, you have this problem, but I am not the person to help you solve it."
Right. And there is I need to find it.
Right.
The Lord hates divorce. That's Malachi 2.
Right.
He hates divorce.
Right.
Hold on. Let me pull up some passages here. Keep talking. I need to pull up something here.
Yeah.
I need to go to Deuteronomy and read this.
So it's
Oh, this is not the right.
it's so we've already talked about how God doesn't like divorce. It's not natural
Mhm.
for our, but neither is a person staying in a relationship that has
Mhm.
them being beaten or otherwise
Right.
otherwise harmed, whether that's physical abuse or mental abuse.
Right.
Like if your significant other is sitting there talking down to you all the time, you don't take that.
So
Yeah.
I think the bigger deal is remarriage.
Right.
From what I'm seeing. Yeah, this one's tough.
It's tough.
This one's a tough one to wrestle with.
It's tougher for the two of us, particularly because neither of us have been married
Yeah.
and neither of us have been in the situation.
And yeah, that's another thing. We've never been on the receiving end of it
Right.
or on the other side of that,
Right.
which I hope we never ever will be on
Right.
the other side. But Matthew 19:8, Jesus says, "Because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it wasn't so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery." So there's a clause in there, and that's the and.
Right.
Whoever divorces his wife and marries another, except for sexual stuff. And with what Paul said, unless they walk out of the relationship,
Right.
and they're not saved,
Right.
commits adultery. So, so it seems like divorce is more okay. Not saying it's great,
Right.
but divorce is more okay than remarriage. Remarriage, I think, is where a lot of the rules come into play, from what I've seen.
Right. And that being said, I don't think don't misquote this passage of God doesn't want me to find a healthy, happy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all, God wants the best for you.
Yeah.
He wants the best for you. Does that mean he wants you stuck in a abusive relationship? No. Divorce them. They're not for you. Does that mean he's going to prevent you from remarrying a nice, loving partner for yourself? No. But it's just you have to be careful. If this abusive partner hints at their abuse before you guys get married and you're dating, you're being like you're free and clear. You can be like, okay, you're abusive. It's a pattern. We're done. You're free and clear. That's nothing wrong. But I don't know what else to add here. I'm running out of stuff.
Yeah, I'm gassing out too. I'm really
All
trying
right.
to. I mean, I've already said everything I know about the topic.
Right. All right.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's a tricky situation.
It's really tough.
It's a tricky.
Some of it I need to reconcile myself to probably as well.
Right.
But I'm never gonna.
All right.
I shouldn't say never, but I'm not gonna. Right now, I'm not the person to say that if there's something going on and
Right.
you shouldn't get out of it.
Right.
I just need to. I need to study it more, and really, I need to talk with people who've been through it,
Right.
either the kids of it or somebody who's been on the receiving end of it,
Right.
to see what they have to say about it.
Okay. Next question.
Next question. Ooh. What does the Bible say about gambling?
It says not to.
Okay. Sure about that?
Yep.
You sure about that?
Look it up.
I am.
It's all part of being a good steward.
It is part of being a good steward. But I think it's Proverbs 13:11. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it.
Huh.
So it's not calling it out as an outright sin, but I think the bigger issue is the love of money.
Right.
I think that's the zoomed out issue.
Right.
I've seen people gamble or do scratchers or whatever,
Right.
just to see what'll happen. I've done that
Exactly.
before. I bought the $1 little scratcher
Yeah.
things,
Yep.
just to be like, let's see what happens, and I've made a little bit
Right.
off of it. But
But if you're going to a casino,
oh yeah, if you're going every weekend,
right, and gambling your entire
Yeah.
paycheck away because you,
that's a sin.
Yep.
That's a sin. If you're addicted to it, especially.
right,
Which it's kind of funny how many things actually fall under the umbrella sin of the lack of self-discipline,
Right.
self-control.
exactly.
Because alcohol's that way, money's that way,
Drugs are that
drugs are that way. Because drugs and alcohol can be medicinal.
way. Right.
They can even be recreational as long as you're not going overboard with it.
Uh-huh.
For the most part, anyway. There's some things that will just negatively affect you no matter what.
Yeah. Gambling can be recreational too.
Yeah. Now here's the thing though. Would you say it's a sin to go watch a movie?
No.
Would you say it's a sin to go to the arcade?
Nope.
Would you say it's a sin to go to the bowling alley?
Nope.
You have no chance of making any money there. You have a chance of making money with scratchers or whatever.
Right. But
I'm just saying.
yeah. But are any of those things a good idea to, a good way to make money consistently?
No.
No.
So
So why are you going to do it if you know you're not going to make? Why are you gambling if you know you're not going to make money at it? You're just sitting there wasting. You're just sitting there wasting your
Right.
money. Whereas, like all the things you mentioned, okay,
mhm.
I know I'm not going to make money, but I'm going to have a lot of fun.
Right. I think we're talking from two ends of the spectrum here.
Right.
I think you're talking about like the addiction end, and I'm just talking about the fun side of it.
Right.
Because there are some people that, okay, say you're a millionaire,
Right.
and you're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to invite my buddies out to a good time, and we're going to blow $10,000 at a casino.
Right.
For a millionaire, or maybe someone who's a millionaire or billionaire or something a few times over,
Right.
would that be a sin for them?
No,
Probably not. For them, that's chump change. For them, that's I'm watching a movie.
I'm watching a movie.
So
Or
I-
it's another thing it's a conviction thing,
right,
but also it's like I said, it's part of being a good steward of your
Mhm.
time and resources. So
I think we're agreeing on this here.
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, honestly, I think if you budgeted for it and you
Right.
can meet all of your needs and you can do all the other things you need to do or want to do at the very least,
right,
then you've got this money set aside for fun.
right,
I think that's fine.
right. Well, there's a difference between budgeting for it and hey, I not right. There's a difference between budgeting for it and going for the
Right.
just going for the waste of it. I'd say the same thing about going to a bar.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the same thing about going to a weed shop.
Right.
Of
Right.
you are just knowingly wasting money
Mm-hmm.
on things that are gonna give you a short
Right.
amount of fun.
Yep.
Personally, I'm not gonna go to a casino because it's just not a fun.
Well, number one, we ain't got the money for it
Right.
anyway.
That just sounds like
That's
a
the
stress.
first thing.
That just sounds like a stressful time, man.
Yeah. But if you can do it and you're not going to be a bad steward
Right.
and you're not addicted to it, like you're not going every weekend or whatever. I
Right.
know guys back home that they go to the boat every month.
Right.
Like, come on, man, really?
Well, even then,
But-
if you're going once if you're going once a month,
That's
you're
fair,
actually
that's fair.
budgeting for it. Or you're going every weekend and you're actually budgeting for it. It's not a bad thing, but it's like
Yeah. Now, I do have something sad to tell you about people being addicted to gambling.
Yeah.
So every week, almost every single break, actually, at one point, until the old grocery store I used to work at banned this company wide. Actually,
yeah,
what happened was when people would go on break, they'd go back to the picnic table we had in the back room. They'd go on break, and all the managers and all of the other people would go on break together. They would go up and buy scratchers. They'd buy 10 scratchers each or something like that, or
Right.
5 or 10. They would buy a bunch of them, each of them.
right,
And they would be sitting there in the back while on their break, scratching away with their pocket knives or quarters or whatever.
Right.
You want to know why?
Why?
Because they didn't want to work anymore.
Exactly.
If you were a customer and you saw all the managers going on break and they're all buying scratchers and stuff, what are you thinking?
What in the world is happening here?
What do you think all of us who saw that said?
What in the world is happening here? It's
Yep. I didn't like I straight up just when I was younger thought that gambling in general was just a sin.
right,
No matter how you diced it. I thought it was because that's all I knew about it.
right,
That's how I was exposed to it. Now, since then I've chilled out on that view because I've seen people be responsible before and have fun
Right.
with it. But
and there's nothing to say you can't go to. I mean, Walmart has the like those
oh yeah, the scratcher machine before
the-
you walk out. Yeah.
the scratcher machine, and back by the board games they have the like the poker chips and
Oh, yeah.
and playing cards.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying gambling is a sin. It's a conviction based thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that if you go to places where people are like conviction is a sin, okay, it's a sin there.
Yeah, don't do it.
Don't go buy scratchers. But if you're like, gambling is you have to be careful with it,
Mm-hmm.
then okay, be careful with it, know what
Right.
you're doing.
Right.
All right, I think we've pretty well covered this one.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page with it.
Yep.
If it's a conviction, and that might be the thing with a lot of these questions too.
Right.
If your conviction is against it or you really struggle with it, then and
Right.
if you're a Christian and you don't struggle with that particular thing, don't invite them to it. Don't tell them you do that. Don't make them stumble.
Right. If you have and this goes for like anything.
Mm-hmm.
I know you mentioned alcohol and drugs before.
Right.
If you're a Christian who doesn't struggle with, smoking and
That'll be the
drinking,
next question, by the way.
if you're a Christian who doesn't have a problem with smoking, drinking,
Mm-hmm.
gambling, don't invite your Christian brother that has a problem with those things
Right.
to a party.
Yeah. Don't invite them. Yeah.
Or if you know
Mhm.
if you want to hang out with them, invite him to a party without those things.
Um,
All right.
there was a story online I saw about this probably 4 or 5 years ago now, but it's always stuck out in my mind. Actually, I got 2 stories I need to tell from about the same period in time.
Right.
The first one is this guy. He was an elder at a church or pastor or
Uh-huh.
something like that. And there was a big potluck, and they had wine. And
Yeah.
he takes a big old thing of wine, and he goes up in front of everybody and says, "Everybody, I've got a glass of wine here, and I'm going to drink it because it's not a sin for me, and I think it's all right. I think it tastes good." Well, then somebody else in the crowd, a few other people did. A few years later, whoa,
What?
the screen did something really weird there for a second. That was weird.
Yeah.
But anyway, a few years later, there's a person from the church that dies from alcohol poisoning.
Oh.
This was a public potluck that the church was having,
Uh-huh.
and where the alcohol thing was served. A couple years
Mhm.
later, somebody dies from alcohol poisoning. What happened is the son of one of the other elders,
Right.
he had alcohol issues in the past and had alcohol poisoning in the past.
Uh-huh.
And he was married, and he had kids and a baby on the way and all that fun stuff. That kid who had struggled with all that before getting married, he had almost died, saw his pastor drinking after he had quit alcohol.
Right.
Now he saw that and he said, "Well, okay, let's try this again. Maybe I can be self-controlled about it." Well, one thing led to another. One drink led to 2 drinks, 2 led to 4, 4 led to 6, and 8, and 12, and so on and so forth. Started getting poisoning again. And this time he dies. Baby on the way, wife and kids, and a bereaved family.
Right.
You got a family that has lost their kid
Right.
because of this one scenario
Right.
with the pastor.
Exactly.
If you were that elder, if you were that wife, if you're the kids, what are you saying to that pastor?
You're fired.
That's it?
That's what I'm starting with.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what the wife would say and the kids would say, because I've never been in the situation of having a spouse or
Right.
a parent die.
Right.
But if I were the board of elders hearing about the story, I'd be like, okay, you're fired. You are barred from this. And now
You trespassed. We're done.
we're done.
Yep.
And well, I don't support people like having a statewide or citywide or countrywide
Mhm.
ban on certain people.
Right.
He's one of the few people I would be like, yeah, I'm calling every church in the city, town, country, state,
Right.
and saying, hey, you do not hire this man. This is what he did. This is why he did it.
Well, you got to be careful with that.
Right.
Because remember Matthew 18, you got to have that process.
Right.
I would say at that point probably that is a tough one because
If
They
it's not the
weren't-
board, if it's not the elders, that you can be
yeah.
certain that his family would call and say, hey,
Yeah, I would
This
say
is what
that I
this-
would have to be accelerated to an elder issue right away because you're dealing with a family in the church
Right.
that dealt with this. It's probably already fairly public anyway, so that's got to be an elder issue.
Right.
Um,
But and I don't mean to sound harsh when saying that, but
mhm.
I do not support like calling people and calling other
Yeah.
organizations saying, hey, don't hire this guy because of this reason. But that's one where I could be like, okay, I'm okay. I get why you're doing it.
I could maybe empathize with it a little bit.
Yeah, I get
I
why.
don't know that I would agree with that statement because maybe that pastor did grow and you know
Right.
from that experience after being called out and let go.
Right.
You know, I don't want to deny that, but it would be disqualifying for pastoral work though.
Right.
It would fall under the disqualifications. So I think that would be a scenario where if you know he puts on his resume that he worked at said church or was a pastor for however many years, and that church called, let's just say my church, and asked for some information, I think then that would constitute
Saying, "Hey, this is what happened.
right.
We fired him. This is why."
But then letting that church make the decision,
Right.
yeah, about if they
Uh,
want to give the guy a shot or not.
Right.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah,
I think we've answered the gambling question and the next question fairly well.
I think so too. My other story that I wanted to tell, I think you and I are on the same board with this when it comes to language,
Right.
specifically cuss words, whatever those are,
I mean, John the
whatever society claims a cuss word is.
John the Baptist called the Pharisees are brood of vipers. So,
Paul pretty much swore in the very beginning of Romans 6. So,
yeah.
or got close to it at the very
Uh,
minimum. He used very strong
so-
language that would not have been normally appropriate for a synagogue or a Roman church.
So,
So-
before you continue with your story,
Yeah.
I love the Christian comedian Brad Stein.
Uh-huh.
He's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
He's hilarious. But he had something that impacted me a lot
Okay.
a few years ago. He said, because he was talking about the story where, you know, the Pharisees could call it a brood of vipers,
Mhm.
and I think Jesus called him a brood of vipers as well. I'm not
Yes,
sure.
he did. I think he repeated it.
I think he repeated it. But Brad Stein, in response to that, said, maybe sin isn't what we think it is. And I think that's
Okay.
I think that's an interesting statement. We can dissect that in another episode of the podcast.
I'm looking up something here. Keep going.
Yeah. Maybe we can discuss that better and like just discussing the sin topic. But it's just it was just an interesting point of, you know, maybe in terms of cuss words, and again with the previous two questions, maybe sin isn't what we think it is growing up and stuff, you know.
Right. So, to build on that,
Right.
I got a story. I think the story that I mentioned previously is going to really fit into what you just said. So,
Right.
Again, grocery store again.
Right.
That I was working at. We would play music before we opened on the PA system, and we had the rock station on. And you know we were jamming out. We were loading up our coolers and stuff because that's where I was working. And no. Normally I would work cooler, but I was working the produce department that morning. And so the produce department at our store was right behind the office. We had an office that was on the second level
Right.
that you could see over the whole store. And a lot of grocery stores do that. Even Walmarts sometimes do that too. But a lot of grocery stores have their office above like their front section.
Right.
And so that way you can see the check registers, you can see the produce open areas very well.
Right.
And you can see kind of down some aisles and whatever, so you can really see what's going on. And so it's actually a really nice method of security and accountability. But anyways, so I was doing I was prepping something in the produce department. I was cutting something up, and it was like 8:10, 8:15 in the morning or something, like maybe a little bit later in the morning. But 8 o'clock was when we opened. And so I'm back there doing my deal. And the rock station was on. We're all jamming out. Everyone in the store who was there right away in the morning was, they were like, oh, yeah, this is great music. You guys got the 80s going.
Good song, whatever, you know.
Oh, yeah, people were loving it.
Right.
Everyone loves the 80s, right? So then, out of nowhere, I just hear the station change. and it goes to some like pop hip hop thing, and I was like, oh really, you went to this station?
Right.
The manager walks down from the office, looks right at me dead in the eye, and said, leave it to the Christians to cuss in their music so that we have to change the station from the good music to something else for the rest of the day. It was a Christian 80s band. I won't say which one it was, but it was a Christian 80s band that had a cuss word in their song because they wanted to be different,
Right.
and they had to change the station. You know what that did?
What?
Turned off that manager to Christianity, thought that they were total hypocrites. That guy will probably never step foot in a church. And it wasn't just that part of hypocrisy
Right.
that turned him off from the church. It was other Christian hypocrisy, unfortunately, that did that too. And I agree with what Lecrae said in either Journey or one of the other songs that he released on that same album, where he said, I let what other Christians do turn into a God wound, even though it was actually the Christians, it was the people.
Right.
And, you know, our was it Ephesians 2 or 3 that says our battle isn't against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces.
Right.
The spiritual forces of darkness. So a lot of, you know, all the sin comes from Satan, obviously, and unfortunately people are used. But you have to remember it's not God that's causing these issues. But he's saying he let the sin of other people affect his view of God, when in reality it was the sin.
Right.
And so, but this guy, this manager, couldn't get past the fact that Christians were cussing on their song.
Right.
Totally turned him off to the gospel.
Right.
What do you think that does? Now, I'm going to pull up a passage. Ephesians 5:4, let there be no filthiness or foolish talk nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. Okay, who defines filthiness or foolish talk or crude joking? Who defines it? What does?
God.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. Ultimately, at the end of the day, yes.
Right.
But are there some things that God wouldn't care about that we still define as cuss words?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Like, okay, let me give an example without saying it because I don't want to be unbecoming
Right.
here. The word crap means
Yep.
it means poop.
Right.
The word poop means
Right.
the word dung means
Exactly.
the SH word means.
Yeah. Yep.
Why do we pick that word? Why?
Right. 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 It's the same.
See what I'm saying?
It's the same thing as the middle finger. Like, why do we pick that finger to
Right.
to
Right.
be the messenger
Why?
of our disdain?
It doesn't make sense.
Right.
You know, people like to take things and run with it. And, okay, you know, going back to the first example, it's like, why did we pick that word
Right.
that we say is bad,
Right.
but the other ones are fine? I could say, oh, crap, all day long, and
Right.
most people wouldn't care.
Right.
Maybe 10, 15 years ago, more people would care, but today, nah, it's fine. So there is a little bit of culture and society involved in it.
Right.
And I'll say it, I think some people are oversensitive.
Oh yeah.
And to an extent, I think people can get over it.
Right.
You know, the word butt, what does it mean? It means butt, rear end, back end. You know, there's other words for it. What does the A word mean?
Donkey.
Okay, that too. But but what does the A word mean? It means but.
Right.
Why do we pick it?
Right.
Now, that's me being practical,
Right.
because that's how I think. I think very practically. I know not everybody else is that way. A lot more people think more emotionally. A lot more people think in terms of relating things to one another. So, like, there's this one thing over here, and everything that's tertiary to it is related to that thing, and so it's
Right.
bad. I understand that, and that's
Right.
why I will never put myself in a situation where I'm going to cause somebody to stumble.
Right. And
So
that's the
I
thing.
just want to put that out
Causing people to, these first few questions are like, okay, it's a personal conviction.
Yeah.
And if it causes you to stumble, okay, don't do it.
Right.
Let your brothers and sisters in Christ. That's the other end of it.
there. Mm-hmm.
Like we've been talking about, okay, these aren't technically sins, but
Yeah.
if they are sins to your brother and sister, don't do them. If these things that we've been talking about
Uh-huh.
or anything else you consider a sin, let your brothers and sisters know. Let your brothers and sisters in Christ know.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I think drinking alcohol is a sin.
Right.
Hey,
Right.
I think gambling is a sin. Whatever it is.
Right.
Whatever it is. Hey, I think this thing is a sin. So that they know,
Yeah.
okay, let's say Nathan considered, this is just an example. Let's
Yeah,
say Nathan,
right.
Let's say Nathan considered drinking a sin.
Mm-hmm. Which I don't, by the way.
It's
Well,
just for
to
the-
a certain degree.
to a certain
Anyway.
degree. The Bible says not to be drunk or intoxicated, so.
Right.
Again, personal conviction.
Anyway.
But let's just say he thinks drinking, like all drinking, is a sin. Is it my responsibility not to drink in front of him? Yes, but it's also his responsibility as my brother in Christ to say, "Hey, I think drinking is a sin."
Right. It's a two-way road.
Right.
Two-way road. Now, some things you can you can just
Right.
assume some things.
Right.
You can figure some things out, even
Right.
just in conversation, or
Right.
go depending on what church they go to, even, or
Right.
where they work, or
Yeah.
like, okay, for some people tattoos is a sin, but if you walk up to somebody and they're tatted to death,
Right.
okay, cool, you could talk tattoos with them probably and be just
Right.
fine,
Right.
But Romans 14, I actually had this passage pulled up for a different thing that I wanted to talk about
Right.
with an entirely different podcast, actually. But Romans 14:16, therefore do not let what is good for you a good thing be spoken of as evil. For the kingdom of God is not eating and drinking, but righteousness and peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. So if you're not holding to that, if you're not taking each other's weaknesses in account with each other, you're
Right.
not acting out of love. You're acting out of your own self-interest,
Right.
basically to make other people mad.
Right.
How much? Yeah, I'm gonna spark this fire. How many worship songs have you seen? And I'll use air quotes for some of it. How many songs have you seen done in churches or colleges or whatever?
There are worship songs, technically speaking.
Right. They might be in the worship category. That for some people you can defend it, and other people they can't get around certain songs for certain reasons, whether it be the publisher that published it or whether it be the people that wrote it.
Right.
Spoiler alert, I am a song for song individual for the most part. There's
Right.
only a few exceptions to that rule that I will personally give.
So am I.
But I think if you investigate a song and it's vetted well enough, and you can say yes, this is defensible according to Scripture,
Right.
then I think it's okay. But
see, coming out of high school, coming out of my high school, I was a little bit more on the legalistic side, and there are some things where I still am. I'm just like, don't do that.
some things aren't worth the effort to try to
Right.
mentally change.
But as in terms of worship go, I was just like, I have a problem with it. I have a problem with a worship song.
Mhm.
Again, some of them you could put in quotes because they're technically worship songs, but they're not.
Mm-hmm.
I have a problem with a worship song that doesn't mention God at all,
Right.
and I'm just like, eh. And as I went through college, as I went through Calvary, I was just like, that might be more of a personal preference. I would like my worship
Right.
if I'm trying to worship God, I would like my songs
To have God in it. Yeah.
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 If I'm trying, like, again, there's a host of things to worship out there, and
Mhm.
for me, it's a personal preference to say, hey, this is the thing I'm worshiping. God is
Right.
what I'm worshiping. What and who?
Yeah.
So
I think so. There's a song out there. Okay, so there was a song that was popular. I think I can say the name of it without getting in trouble. From Michael and Lisa Gungor, called Vapor.
Are we gonna tear this to shreds?
No, I don't think that's. I don't think it's worth it.
Eh,
I think it'd be.
fair enough.
I think that's shooting a dead horse. But there was a song that was real popular, and there was a lot of people who liked it, and there was a lot of people that had a problem with it. Now, overall, the song is pretty ecclesiastical in nature,
Right.
because our life is a vapor. It is a
Right.
chasing of the wind. That's straight out of Ecclesiastes, like 3 or something like
Right.
that, or 2. It's straight out. That's straight out of Scripture. But what is the context of the author? Well, there's some lines in the song that people went back and forth of, like heaven taunts the hearts of men. Might be technically correct, but can be stretched very easily into something else.
Right.
So I think people would struggle with that line overall.
Right.
So unless you have a very mature congregation, that might struggle with it. There's some other lines in there that I disagreed with.
Right.
That might be an over grammatical
Right.
look, because a lot of times worship music doesn't follow grammar properly, and a lot of times
Right.
the things that you maybe mean to be worshiping God with, you accidentally worship a tree. But
Exactly.
grammatically speaking,
It's
but
that's just something like. Could it be classified as a worship song? Yes. But again, going back to what I said, I would prefer to have a clear what and who exactly I'm worshiping.
right.
Am I worshiping Jesus or am I worshiping the cross?
That's a good point. A lot of
Yeah.
people idolize the cross or even the Bible itself.
Right.
Oh, that's a whole nother podcast, bro.
That's a whole nother
Yeah.
podcast.
I agree with you, though.
If you're new here, hi. We just spout off random nonsense that is coherent sometimes.
Usually, if you just like start with like the first 2 sentences that we say and then just skip ahead like 10 minutes, you'll probably get the point.
Yeah. Now then again, we're trying to answer questions here on this particular episode, so
Right.
we might want to move on to the next question.
Well, I mean, we're at 50 minutes already, so this might be it. But
Yeah.
I think the closing statement here, and I'll switch to the outro. Is that oh no, wait, that wasn't. Oh, that was the right one. Okay.
Uh-oh.
The thing here with that is that a lot of people struggled with that song and other songs.
Right.
I don't want to single out just one. There was many others,
Right.
and a lot of people struggled with it. But there were people in charge that wanted to select said music
Right.
because their conviction personally wasn't against it. And what ended up happening is they instigated a lot of drama, and instead of being worshipful and worship-minded towards the Lord, they were self-minded and being selfish in wanting to sing that music. And it is selfishness, and if it pisses you off that I said it,
I'm sorry. But not
then
sorry.
sorry, not sorry. It should show you, if you get mad at that statement, that you are being selfish in that moment.
Right.
So
That's just not in regards to that song. That's to
yeah,
the
everything in
writers,
general.
the producers, anything.
Yeah.
If you get mad at people for calling after, who produced the song, I'm sorry. There are organizations out there that claim to be Christian that have some pretty wild views, and and I have seen the danger of allowing their music into.
Well,
there.
and that's when personal conviction comes into
Right.
play. I'm a song for song guy. If you're a publisher type person, I get that.
Right.
You know, there are people that will struggle more with who wrote the song versus the song itself. Oh, technically, we just hit that. Well, we'll keep going. There are people who struggle more with that than others. And instead of being extra about it, you know, being, well, that's your personal thing, but this is this church, and we're going to do this, and blah, 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 blah. If you're not listening to your own people and your own congregation, there's no grace, there's no love there.
Right.
It's very clear that you are trying to be a stumbling block because
Right.
you are being too stubborn to change.
Or at the very least, you're not caring if you are a stumbling block.
Yeah. Wow.
All right.
Like, comment, subscribe.
We're past the outro now. Thank you.
Sorry that
We went on.
we went on long. Actually, I'm not really sorry about that.
Not
That
really
was a really
sorry.
good point. All right. Love you guys. Thank
Love
you for
you.
listening to our ramblings.
Have fun.
Bye.